in Roger Lear's, implant removal. And he's going to be back on next week. And, some of the things he told me kind of, my hair kind of, stood straight on my arms. Sure. I mean,
well, like Travis Walton, the story he tells, it's horrifying.
Well, I don't know. That's what gets me. It's just like I've had a couple guests on, that basically say that the aliens, when they were supposedly abducted, were warm and fuzzy little, and then, I had one guest on, and I don't want to make him sound bad because, I logically think what he encountered was he was abducted. He said he saw 5 grays coming into his bedroom window, coming in there, and they kind of commanded him to fall asleep. And then, he would go out, he was a nature person, so he was always out hiking and all that stuff. He started seeing owls and all that stuff, and I pointed out to the guy, I said, maybe when you were abducted, some reason they implanted that in your brain, so maybe if you got abducted again or again and again, that he thought you were seeing owls, when actually they were whatever.
That's actually a thing. That's a thing, actually. The owls, that's a thing. And it's a screen memory where, whoever's taking you see owls instead. That's actually a thing. As far as us being visited, absolutely. I subscribe to the Hynek kind of approach to it, which is 90% of everything that is seen in the sky is us. And 10% is unexplainable, like an alien. I do think they do abduct people. The way that I kind of explain my belief in it is that when I was a kid, I want to say, your mind works in mysterious ways, but I always, for some reason, link it to watching Battlestar Galactica. So when I was watching Battlestar Galactica, I remember around the same time I would watch Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom with Marlon Perkins.
Good combination.
And the way that I think about it is that they're kind of like Marlon Perkins. And I remember this one episode in particular that he was up in a helicopter because Marlon, he got into it. He wasn't just like commenting. He was in there, right? And I remember this one episode where they were up in a helicopter and he's talking about how they're following these buffalo and kind of explaining the buffalo and where they're living and where they are and what they're doing and all this massive herd of buffalo. And he goes, now we're going to tag it. And so he takes out a tranquilizer rifle. Now, I was a little kid, so I could have this all wrong. But I remember seeing somebody shoot that buffalo with a tranquilizer rifle. And they commented that they needed to use a super powerful one because the buffalo is so big. And so they tranquilize this buffalo. The rest of the herd runs off. This one poor buffalo is laying there, tranquilized. And so they land the helicopter, and a whole bunch of vets and a bunch of other people, scientists and people, are standing around this poor buffalo. And they're looking at it, and they're examining his teeth. They're looking at, his tail and his butt and his other things, and his feet and his hide. And they're kind of doing a write-up on him. And then they tagged him. They put a tag in his ear. And I think the tag had a radio transponder so they could follow him. They even did this on the Colbert Report a few years ago. There was like a sea turtle, and they tagged it. And Colbert had subsidized the tagging of a sea turtle, and they were actually tracking it on the show. But again, Marlon Perkins. So they tagged this buffalo, and they're like, okay, the tranquilizer's going to wear off. Everybody run away. So everybody runs away. Helicopter goes up. Trucks go out. Buffalo gets up, takes off. And he's like, now we can follow it around. He's got the little, and they're following this thing around. I think of it the same way. That if you look at an honest to God abduction scenario, right? What you've got is you pick a person for whatever reason, and they're an alien intelligence. I have no idea why they pick A versus B, but they pick A. They go down there, they inject an implant into them, right? What's that implant doing? That implant is feeding them telemetry. Okay. It's going to tell them what his or her heart rate is doing, how much oxygen, who knows what it's fishing out of the person's body. But what it's doing is it's mining data. That data is being sent somewhere. Now, if you look at like cattle mutilations, for example, right? What are they taking? They take the tongue, they take the rectum, and a few other things, the genitalia. Yeah. They drain the blood. They take chunks of meat from high protein areas. They're doing an analysis. They take some of the organs, the heart, the stomach, the lungs. Well, there's a lot you can tell from an animal's lungs. You can tell what they're breathing. Stomach tells you what they're eating. Rectum can tell you about cleanliness. You can look at the genitalia to figure out procreation. The tongue is going to tell you a lot about what they're being exposed to. Eyeballs, all kinds of stuff. But all these things are scientific in nature. That each one of those things tells you something about the environment that the animal was living in. So it seems to make a lot of sense. But I don't think they do it on a mass scale. And I kind of liken them to space biologists, that they come here. We're like ants. They don't really care about us. They're not going to fix our nuclear waste problems. But they're curious, so they're going to tag people, follow them around. Where do they live? Where do they move? What are they doing? They can understand social patterns. They can understand subsistence patterns. They can see what they're eating, how healthy they are, etc. So it all makes sense to me. So I have no problem at all believing that these things are real. I don't think that they happen en masse.
No, I don't know about that. I know that, like Dr. Lear's number 9 implant removal, after he had it removed, about a year later, him and his wife were heading towards town, and what he told me, it's about the same place he saw the UFO the first time. He saw the UFO again, and his wife said, go to town. He came to stop, and he looked at it, and he went to town. And I mentioned to him, I said, well, maybe they knew that your implant was removed, and you saw the UFO the second time because they re-implanted you. Did you ever check the second time? And he goes, no, I never went back and seen if I was implanted a second time. But from what he told me, what Dr. Lear removed, it had some silver in it. It had some other compounds. They didn't even know what it was. They just know it couldn't have been formed on this earth. Even he said the silver, the report, it came back from the lab, is that something was mixed in the silver that they didn't know what it was.
Well, I'll give you another one. It's not about abductions, but just UFOs in general. There was a UFO sighting. I remember because I used to help out on a radio show, and my friend, he had done field work down in South America, so he spoke Spanish exceptionally well, very fluently. And there was a story about this UFO that was hanging around down in South America, and they called themselves like friendship something or another. But a lot of rural villages in South America, they have ham radios. That's how they communicate. And this thing would come overhead, and then they'd pick up a radio transmission on the ham radio, and they would actually speak to the object over the ham radio. And they actually recorded it. And what he did is he had a friend who actually taught Spanish at a university where they were, and where he is. And he asked his friend, the professor, to come in and to listen to the transmission. And so she listens to the transmission, and she says, that's the damnedest thing I've ever heard. And he says, well, why? Well, because the guy on the radio is speaking perfect, absolutely perfect Spanish. No slang, no anything. Perfect textbook Spanish. But that wasn't what was weird, because, hey, I learned Spanish in school. I spoke textbook Spanish because my Spanish came out of a textbook, right? What she said that was weird is that the guy spoke it with perfect inflection, but no accent. Now, I'm from the United States. I'm from the West Coast. If I speak Spanish, I speak it with an American accent, or more specifically, a West Coast accent, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it just happens.
Yeah.
If you're from Iowa, you're going to speak Spanish with an Iowa accent.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Or if you're from North Carolina, Mexico, the same way. I mean, yeah.
North Carolina, Mexico, Honduras, Nicaragua, Brazil, well, not Brazil, but Argentina, Colombia, Uruguay, wherever you're from, you're going to speak with an accent. This had no accent at all, which is theoretically impossible. He asked her, he said, well, is it being generated by a computer? And she's a linguist. And she's like, no, that's a person, but he's speaking it with no accent. And they claim, these guys claim that they were talking to a UFO that was hovering next to a mountain next to their village. You hear stuff like that. You know, I've seen UFOs. I've seen stuff that I can't explain, that I don't think was human. You can't explain it. It does things. I was part of a mass UFO sighting once. And, I mean, I saw stuff for hours that I could not explain rationally. Yeah. So, although, like I said, I do think that most all of them are things that we misidentify, whether they're planes or trains or Venus or, you know, whatever, lights, flashlights or whatever, swamp gas, whatever you want to call it. There is a percentage that is alien in origin. And I swear to you that at least one time I saw, well, at least 2 times, I saw something that was not human. So I believe 110%.
Oh, I would. Hey, Michael, are you still out there?
I am.
Do you want to talk about what that scientist came up to you and handed you here a couple weeks ago, and maybe mention that too? Yeah, he was he runs the IUFO team. You know, they investigate UFOs.
Okay.
And he had a scientist come down and ask for him. He thought he was getting served. He's an attorney. We call him the paranormal lawyer. That he was getting served. It turned out the guy. Well, Michael, you go into it.
Yeah. Well, real quickly, we were having our normal weekly meeting of the UFOI team, and from behind me comes up an elderly gentleman, casually dressed, with a manila envelope, and asks for myself by name, and I'm going, I'm going to get served with papers here. He hands me the paper, and the envelope, I pull it out of the envelope, and it says, the propulsion system for UFOs. And it looks like a white paper, and it's got the author's name on there. And so I turned around real quickly, because this guy was hustling out of the room, and I said, are you the author? And he says, yes. And that's all he said, and he left. It's about 40 pages, and we've had Boeing engineers in our group review this thing, and it all has to do with some kind of rotating vortex with mercury, liquid mercury and that kind of stuff. So we're trying to get it analyzed on this whole thing. But my last question...
Sounds like the bell.
It does, exactly. It sounds like the bell. You're right. Yeah. But Olaf, I was thinking when you were telling about this alternative 3, what if this alien program is working with the military or the government on the actual alternative 3 process? Maybe they are, like you said, tagging certain individuals who would actually end up being, I don't know about abducted, but taken off at the time when that we needed to colonize Mars again.
A long time ago, I learned a very, very useful trait. When I do research, right, I demand 2 things of myself. One is that anything that I'm going to really try to buy into, it has to pass Occam's razor. And Occam's razor is the notion that the simplest answer is probably the right one. I found that to be true through my whole life. The other thing that I demand of myself is I have to be open to all the possibilities. I don't want to go into it with a preconceived notion. So if you come to me at a convention or something, I'll be at 5D in August. If you come to my little table and say, hey, here's a UFO propulsion system, I'm going to take that at face value, and I'm going to say, okay, that's a UFO propulsion system. It's incumbent upon me to prove it's not versus prove that it is, right? So I try to take all these kinds of things with a very open mind, because even if it turns out not to be what I think it is, by having an open mind, I can see what it actually